In a season defined by instability, SHEDEUR Sanders became the Browns' only constant. No head coach. Rotating schemes. A protection unit that turned pass plays into survival drills. Still, Sanders stayed upright, kept the offense moving, and gave Cleveland its only 2-game win streak of the year. For months the league looked away. Then, in the quiet of Week 18's aftermath, came a $5,000.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Proof from the league office that one of those uncalled hits had finally crossed the line. It was more than validation. It was confirmation that Sanders had been playing through a level of contact most rookies never face, and fewer survive. What makes that moment matter is what it changes in retrospect. His composure isn't just maturity, it's resilience under neglect. His ball security isn't just good coaching, it's instinct under fire. And the conversation isn't about potential anymore. It's about what's already been proven under the worst conditions. If John Harbaugh is even considering stepping in, it's because Sanders showed enough grit and command to make a coaching legend see a future. The Browns might have found their quarterback, not because he dominated but because he endured. The NFL waited until the very end, Week 18 to be exact, before it finally said what so many people had been saying all year. SHEDEUR Sanders was being hit late, hit dirty, and hit unfairly. And no one did anything about it. Not the refs on the field. Not the analysts behind the microphones. Not the league offices. Until now. A $5,000 fine. That's all it took to shift the tone from debate to documentation. On paper, it's a slap on the wrist for Bengals defender Cedric Johnson. But off the paper, in the context of a brutal rookie season, it's a quiet admission from the NFL that SHEDEUR Sanders had been right. And not just once. Over and over. Because this wasn't just a one-off penalty buried in an end-of-season report. This fine passed through layers of internal review. It went up the food chain and landed in Roger Goodell's office. That's what gives it weight. It wasn't routine, it was approved. It was deliberate. And it was late. But it confirmed everything. It confirmed that Sanders wasn't being overly sensitive. That defenders were getting away with more than they should have. That the league's officiating crews had failed to enforce the rules equally, especially when it came to a young quarterback playing under the worst possible circumstances. And what were those circumstances? Let's not downplay them. Cleveland had no permanent head coach. Offensive schemes were shuffled like cards every week. The offensive line was a revolving door. Nothing was consistent except the pressure in Sanders' face and the lack of protection behind him. This wasn't a rookie campaign. This was an obstacle course. And through all of it he kept his composure. He led. He managed the ball. He held onto the locker room and even found a way to deliver 2 consecutive wins, the team's only win streak all season. That alone should have earned him some grace. Instead, he got critiques dissecting his footwork, questions about his last name, and coverage that focused more on what he wasn't than what he was surviving. There was no proportionality in the way he was treated, on or off the field. And that's the real story. The league didn't protect Sanders during the games. The officials didn't enforce quarterback safety when it counted. And the media wasn't interested in giving him the benefit of the doubt. It took until after the season was over for the NFL to retroactively confirm what fans had been shouting from the sidelines all year long. The hits weren't just hard, they were illegal. The timing makes it worse. A postseason fine is symbolic. It doesn't change outcomes. It doesn't rewind the tape and give Sanders another shot on 3rd down. It doesn't undo the damage or the narrative. It just says in corporate language, "Oops, that shouldn't have happened." And then it moves on. But fans didn't forget. Because when you spend 18 weeks watching your rookie quarterback get blasted, only to hear silence from the league office every time, you start to wonder what it takes for someone to care. Now we know. It takes a review process, a quiet acknowledgement, and a $5,000 charge to a player's paycheck after the season has ended. That's the system. And that's the problem. Because the NFL has built an identity around protecting quarterbacks. It's baked into their rules, their replays, their branding. But that protection isn't applied equally. When Mahomes or Allen takes a late shot, the camera cuts to the ref's flag midair. When SHEDEUR Sanders takes the same shot, play on. The fine is a crack in that hypocrisy. It's not enough, but it's proof. And now it puts the pressure right back on the Browns. Because what's the excuse now? You can't say he wasn't tough enough. He stood in the pocket and got drilled with no calls to save him. You can't say he didn't show growth. He stabilized a broken offense and strung together wins. You can't say the criticism wasn't biased. When identical hits drew flags for others and nothing for him, the disparity wasn't subtle. So where does Cleveland go from here? You've got a quarterback who showed poise under fire. A quarterback who didn't flinch when the system failed him. A quarterback who kept his mouth shut, took the hits and got back up every week. And now you have a moment of clarity from the league that says, yeah, he was taking more than he should have. What more do you need to commit? This fine doesn't just confirm the late hit. It redefines the season. Instead of asking, did Sanders do enough? The question becomes, how did he manage to do anything with what he had? Because under that kind of pressure, literal and figurative, most rookie quarterbacks fold. But SHEDEUR didn't. He held. And holding it together in Cleveland is not easy. This is a franchise that's built an entire legacy out of quarterback turnover. But if they've ever had a reason to stop the carousel, this is it. You can't blame the kid for not performing when the foundation beneath him was crumbling every week. And now you have one of the most respected names in coaching floating around the rumor mill, John Harbaugh. A coach known for system stability, player development and quarterback-first philosophy. If he sees something in Sanders, that's not hype. That's not a narrative. That's football judgment. And that judgment should be more than enough to reset the conversation inside Cleveland's front office. Because what SHEDEUR showed this year, grit, discipline, leadership, those aren't stats. You don't find those in spreadsheets. You see them in how a guy handles being hit late and getting no flag. In how he responds when the game plan changes midweek. In how he keeps the locker room when the team is barely holding together. So if the Browns decide to hit reset again, that won't be about football. That'll be about denial. About ignoring what's right in front of them because they'd rather chase a headline than build on what they already have. And here's the kicker, the fine that changed the narrative? It didn't have to happen. If the officiating had been consistent, if the rules had been applied the same way for SHEDEUR as they were for others, this wouldn't even be a conversation. But because the league got it wrong for 18 weeks and finally had to admit it, now we're having the conversation they didn't want to have. And it's not just about Sanders anymore. It's about how the league treats its rookies, especially ones without top-tier protection or media privilege. It's about how officiating standards mysteriously loosen when the team is struggling. It's about how quickly narratives get written when the context is ignored. This fine is the line in the sand. You can't unsee what it means. You can't pretend it was meaningless. Because the NFL doesn't approve these things lightly. The fact that it required a full internal review in Goodell's own office to sign off says it loud. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't close. This was a missed call. A failure of the officiating system. And someone had to own it. So now the Browns have to own their next move. You've got a quarterback who was thrown into a fire and didn't run. You've got the league quietly confirming that he was taking more than he should have. And you might have a championship-caliber coach willing to work with him. What are you waiting for? Let us know your thoughts. Should the Browns finally stop chasing the next new quarterback and start building around the one who just survived a season no rookie should have been asked to endure? Was the fine too little, too late? Or is it the start of something bigger? A long overdue reckoning in how the league protects or doesn't protect its most vulnerable players? Drop your takes in the comments. Hit like if you think officiating standards need to be applied across the board. Share this with someone who still thinks SHEDEUR hasn't proved anything. And subscribe if you're here for the truth behind the league's quietest, most telling moments. Because this one's not just about justice. It's about the beginning of accountability. And it's long overdue. And now that the NFL has blinked, even just for a moment, that accountability door is cracked open, and it's not closing anytime soon. For the league, this fine might have been a formality. Something they hoped would go unnoticed in the usual avalanche of postseason news. But for SHEDEUR Sanders? For Cleveland? For every rookie quarterback grinding through chaos without the protection the league promises in its rulebook commercials? This wasn't just a note in an internal report. This was confirmation. From the top. That it came after Week 18 only emphasizes how broken the system is. Because had that late hit been flagged when it happened, it could have changed the game. Momentum, yardage, maybe even the outcome. But more than that, it would have changed the message. The message that says, we're watching. We're protecting our quarterbacks. We're enforcing the rules. Instead, what Sanders got all season long was silence. And that silence wasn't neutral. It had a cost. A physical cost. A reputational cost. A developmental cost. Because when you're getting hit late and nothing's being called, it does more than just hurt. It changes how you play. You start throwing quicker than you should. You stop trusting your protection. You second-guess your decisions not because you're unsure, but because you're bracing for contact that may or may not be legal. and no one's going to save you. That's the environment Sanders was operating in. And still, through all that, he led the Browns to back-to-back wins. The first win streak they'd had all season. He kept the offense afloat in the middle of rotating playbooks and coaching instability. He didn't just survive, he stabilized. And that's exactly what no one seemed to want to talk about, until now. Because this fine recontextualizes everything. Now, when we talk about the rookie season SHEDEUR Sanders had, it's no longer fair to just talk stats. We have to talk stakes. We have to talk adversity. And more importantly, we have to talk treatment. Because for months, the narrative was shaped by what wasn't being said. The league didn't speak. The officials didn't throw flags. So the media filled the vacuum with tired analysis, arm strength, reads, mechanics. As if any of that can be honestly evaluated when the quarterback is running for his life and getting ignored by the guys in stripes. Now there's evidence. Now there's league-level confirmation that Sanders wasn't being treated like other quarterbacks. And once you acknowledge that, everything else shifts. It goes from, why isn't he progressing faster? To, how was he even standing upright by week 18? And now we look at those wins differently. Now we look at the ball security, not as average but as exceptional. Now we look at his composure, not as expected but as remarkable. Because this wasn't just any rookie year. This was a test. Not just of football IQ but of resilience. And SHEDEUR passed it even as the league failed to protect him. So where does this leave Cleveland? Because there's no neutral path forward anymore. Either they recognize what they have and commit to building around him, or they fall back into old habits. Draft another quarterback. Start over. Pretend like SHEDEUR's rookie year was ordinary. Like it didn't carry the weight of organizational dysfunction and league-wide indifference. Like it didn't require an apology from the NFL, in the form of a $5,000 fine, to set the record straight. That would be a mistake. A massive one. Because this isn't just about optics. This is about substance. What SHEDEUR Sanders showed this year is the kind of internal strength that makes a franchise quarterback. It's not loud. It doesn't always show up on the stat sheet. But it's what keeps a team from falling apart when everything else is broken. And that's not something you find in every draft class. So if the Browns let that walk, if they ignore this moment and do what they've always done, then they're not just losing a quarterback. They're confirming every fear fans have about this front office. That they don't know what to do with potential unless it comes prepackaged and flawless. But SHEDEUR Sanders never claimed to be flawless. What he showed was the ability to lead through instability. To absorb the hits, on the field and in the press, and still line up the next week with control, poise, and the will to win. And now that the NFL has finally acknowledged that he was playing under a different, more dangerous standard? Now that it's not just a theory but a fact? There's no more pretending. This fine draws a line between speculation and truth. And once truth is on the table, it's up to the franchise to respond. Because you can't say, we believe in him, and then keep him behind the same broken line. You can't say, he's the guy, and then bring in another coordinator who changes the playbook every 2 weeks. You can't talk development if you're not giving the quarterback anything to develop with. That's where the rumored interest from John Harbaugh becomes so critical. Harbaugh doesn't just develop quarterbacks, he builds frameworks around them. Discipline. Consistency. Accountability. He brings structure where there is none. And if he's looking at Sanders as a quarterback he can mold, that should be all the confirmation the Browns need. Because Harbaugh doesn't play politics. He evaluates talent. If he thinks Sanders has the intangibles, the stuff you can't coach, that should carry more weight than anything said in the press box all year. And if Cleveland has a chance to bring in a coach like that, and pair him with a quarterback who's already proven he can handle chaos, that's not a rebuild. That's a foundation. But it's only a foundation if the team chooses to see it that way. Because the fine might have come late. But the consequences of ignoring it will be immediate. Let SHEDEUR walk and someone else will pick him up. Likely a more stable franchise. Give up now and you're not just starting over. You're giving away a quarterback who's already done the hardest part. Surviving a dysfunctional system with his head still on straight. And for what? Another shot at the draft lottery? This is the NFL. No rookie comes without flaws. The ones who make it are the ones who can learn, adapt, and lead, even when the system isn't built for them. SHEDEUR Sanders already showed he can do that. So now it's the Browns' turn. Do they build forward? Do they take the league's rare admission and use it as fuel to course correct? Or do they waste another opportunity, fail to protect another quarterback, and end up watching from the sidelines, again, as someone else turns adversity into greatness? And now that the truth is on record, even buried in a league report, the NFL can't backpedal. The Browns can't spin. And the narrative? It's officially changed. For most of the 2025 season, SHEDEUR Sanders was painted as just another struggling rookie. Too raw. Too hyped. Too erratic. Critics didn't bother separating performance from environment. They collapsed it all into a single narrative: he's not ready. But the tape said otherwise. And now the fine says even more. Because when Cedric Johnson delivered that late hit in Week 18, another hit in a long line of them, it wasn't treated like anything unusual at the time. No flag. No outrage. Just another uncalled blow to a rookie quarterback from a team the league wasn't watching closely. The broadcast moved on. The refs stayed quiet. And SHEDEUR? He got back up. Again. And now, after the season, the NFL is quietly saying, that wasn't okay. Well, if it wasn't okay in Week 18, what about the ones in Weeks 4, 7, and 11? What about the other hits? The other non-calls? The body shots that came late and low while the Browns were losing and the cameras were focused on something else? The difference this time is that the league had no choice. The play was too clear. The contact too obvious. And most importantly, the pressure had finally built up. Because this wasn't just about one player. This was about the NFL's promise of equity and player safety. And for a league obsessed with optics, letting this one slide would have looked a little too transparent, even for them. But it took 18 weeks. 18 weeks of unflagged contact. 18 weeks of public silence. 18 weeks of SHEDEUR Sanders getting no benefit of the doubt. And when the league finally responded, they didn't hold a press conference or issue a statement. They quietly filed a fine and hoped that would be the end of it. But it's not. Because you can't unring that bell. That fine confirmed what fans had been saying all season, that the standard of protection wasn't being applied evenly. That if SHEDEUR Sanders had been drafted to a different team, behind a better line, under a more stable coach, the officiating would have looked different. That what was allowed to happen to him wasn't just bad luck, it was systemic failure. And if the league had to be pressured into recognizing one illegal hit after the season, how many others were waved off in real time because the QB didn't have the name, the resume, or the win total to warrant the flag? This is what happens when narratives dictate officiating. And it's not just about SHEDEUR. It's about every rookie quarterback thrown into chaos without institutional support. It's about how the league protects its marketable assets, while letting kids on dysfunctional teams absorb punishment with no recourse. The message is clear: until you earn star treatment, you're fair game. But the thing is, you shouldn't have to earn basic protection. It's supposed to be built into the rules. That's the entire point. The NFL has made protecting the quarterback its calling card. They fine players for glancing helmet contact. They rewrite rules every offseason. They issue video explainers on roughing the passer. And yet, somehow SHEDEUR Sanders got treated like none of that applied. Until a late hit forced their hand. And now there's no going back. Because even if the fine was minimal in financial terms, it's massive in meaning. It turned whispers into proof. It gave fans who were told they were overreacting a concrete receipt. And it forced everyone, from beat reporters to league execs, to confront a season that no longer fits inside the box score. So now the Browns have to decide who they're going to be. Are they going to be the team that finally breaks the cycle? That sees a young quarterback who played through pain, pressure, and public skepticism, and stood tall anyway? Or are they going to do what they've done before? Panic. Hit reset. Start over. Because the answer is sitting right in front of them. And it's not just about Harbaugh. It's not just about coaching. It's about vision. It's about recognizing that SHEDEUR Sanders didn't fail this season. He endured it. And if he could do that without a stable line, a permanent head coach, or even basic officiating protections, then what could he be with those things? That's the question Cleveland should be asking. Because resilience like this doesn't show up on every roster. Most quarterbacks would have checked out. Mentally, physically, emotionally, it's hard to keep bouncing back when the league keeps telling you, subtly or not, that you don't matter. But Sanders never wavered. And that should count for more than a few incomplete passes and a stat line that doesn't tell the full story. Now that the NFL has spoken, even if barely, the Browns don't get to pretend anymore. They can't hide behind the usual excuses. The same league that let Sanders take these hits is now admitting they shouldn't have. That opens the door to accountability. And whether or not Cleveland walks through it will say more about this franchise than any draft pick ever could. Because here's what they know now, without question. Their rookie quarterback survived a season where everything around him was working against him. And he didn't just survive, he showed leadership. He earned trust. He gave this team something it hasn't had in years, a reason to hope. So what are they going to do with that? Let it fade? Or protect it? Because quarterbacks like this don't just grow on trees. especially not ones who've already proven they can lead through dysfunction. The Browns have spent years looking for a guy who can handle the pressure. Now they've got one, and the only question is whether they'll actually build something around him. If they don't, they'll be right back here next year. Same conversation. Same search. Same failure to connect the dots. But if they do? If they take this fine for what it really is, a wake-up call, a turning point, a chance to own the mistake and do better, then maybe this isn't just another forgettable Browns season. Maybe it's the one where they finally stop breaking quarterbacks and start backing them. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the fine finally changes the narrative around SHEDEUR Sanders? Should the Browns make him the cornerstone or start over again? And how many more quarterbacks will have to endure this kind of season before the league actually fixes the system? Tap that like if you're done with the double standards. Share if you've been saying this since week 1. And subscribe if you want more honest breakdowns about what's really happening behind the NFL's polished curtain. Because SHEDEUR didn't just take hits this season. He took the weight of silence. And now that silence has cracked, everyone's listening.